The youngest cadet. In the vast, distant future where wars raged between planets and warriors were honed from birth, there was a young cadet named Lyra. She wasn't like the others. While the rest of her fellow cadets were strong, tough, and had years of training behind them, Lyra was the youngest ever to join the prestigious elite war corps. At just 16 years old, she was an odd sight among the older, more experienced cadets who towered over her. The moment she entered the training ground, a hush fell over the crowd. Her uniform, slightly too big, hung on her frame, making her appear even smaller than she really was. The other cadets exchanged skeptical looks. They had heard the rumors, of course, how the youngest cadet had somehow passed the rigorous selection trials, but none of them believed that someone so young could keep up with them, let alone survive in a world full of ruthless combatants. Lyra was determined, though. Her heart raced as she glanced around, seeing the hardened faces of the other cadets. They looked at her as if she were a joke. She knew what they were thinking. How could someone so young possibly stand a chance? Against the toughest soldiers in the galaxy? The instructors didn't help either. They looked at Lyra as if she were a mere distraction in the grand scheme of things. But there was something they didn't know. Lyra wasn't just any cadet. There was something about her, something hidden, deep inside that no one had noticed yet. As the training began, the other cadets quickly showed off their skills. They were fast, agile, and their strength seemed limitless. Some of them even mocked Lyra, making cruel jokes about how she would never last through the week. Lyra stayed silent, her eyes fixed ahead. She wasn't there to prove them wrong, at least not yet. She was there to prove something to herself. The first exercise was an obstacle course, and it was brutal. It involved running through thick mud, climbing walls, crawling under barbed wires, and dodging moving targets. For the other cadets, it was just another day of training. But for Lyra, every step was a test. The mud clung to her boots, and the heavy weight of the training gear made her legs ache. But she pushed forward, step by step, refusing to stop. When she reached the first wall, the older cadets were already ahead of her, laughing at her slow pace. "Come on, little girl," one of them sneered. "You're not going to make it." But Lyra didn't listen. She grabbed the ropes and started to climb, using every ounce of strength she had. The others didn't expect her to reach the top, but she did. When she pulled herself over the edge, she caught her breath, feeling a sense of victory that no one could take from her. As the day went on, Lyra showed them that despite being the youngest, she wasn't someone to be underestimated. Her perseverance and determination were like no one had ever seen before. Even when others faltered, Lyra kept going. She was silent, focused, and driven by something deep within, a desire to prove herself not to them, but to herself. Little did the others know, this was just the beginning. Lyra wasn't going to be the weak link in their training. She wasn't going to be the joke. She was going to show them that the youngest cadet might just have the power to become the strongest. The question was, how far would she go, and what secrets lay hidden within her that no one yet understood? The journey was just beginning, and Lyra was ready to face whatever came next. The training begins. The next day, the air was thick with anticipation. Lyra stood at the edge of the training ground, the sun barely rising above the horizon. Today would be unlike any other. The other cadets had seen the obstacle course, but now they were about to face the real challenge, combat training. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about learning how to fight, how to outsmart, and how to kill. Lyra felt the weight of her gear more heavily today. The black armor that was supposed to fit all cadets in the elite war corps felt like a mountain on her small frame. It was heavy, the plates rubbing against her skin with every move. Still, she didn't let it show. She had learned to keep her emotions in check since she first stepped onto the training grounds. She couldn't afford to let the others see her doubts. The cadets lined up, their faces set in grim determination. The instructors were silent, observing, waiting for each cadet to make their move. Lyra stood next to the older cadets, trying to match their focus. She knew this was her moment. No more jokes, no more mockery. She was going to prove herself. The first part of the combat training was hand-to-hand combat. The instructors paired them up, and Lyra was thrust into a ring with one of the toughest cadets in the class, an older, muscular soldier named Roran. He had been at the academy for years, and everyone knew him as the one who could take down anyone in a matter of seconds. He smirked when he saw Lyra. His towering figure cast a shadow over her, but she didn't flinch. Roran lunged at her, his movements quick and brutal. Lyra barely had time to react as he grabbed her by the arm and threw her to the ground. The impact sent a shock of pain through her body, but she didn't let it stop her. She pushed herself up, breathing deeply, ignoring the burning ache in her side. She wasn't going to fall, not this time. As Roran advanced again, Lyra saw an opening. His foot was slightly off balance. It was a small weakness, but it was enough. With a swift movement, she kicked his leg out from under him, sending him crashing to the ground. The other cadets gasped. No one had ever seen Roran lose in combat before. But there was Lyra, standing tall, her chest heaving with effort, her expression calm. She had done it. Roran's face twisted in surprise and frustration, but he quickly recovered, getting back to his feet. This time he was more cautious, more calculating. But Lyra could see it now. Roran was no longer fighting to win. He was fighting to prove something to himself. His pride had been bruised. And in that moment, Lyra understood what it meant to fight not just for survival, but for respect. The fight dragged on, with both combatants showing no signs of yielding. Lyra could feel her body growing tired, the sweat pouring down her face, but something kept her moving. It was as if an inner fire was pushing her forward, urging her not to stop. She couldn't explain it, but it was there. This relentless drive to keep fighting. Finally, in one swift motion, Lyra grabbed Roran's wrist and twisted it behind, his back forcing him to the ground once more. This time she didn't let go. She held him there, the weight of her determination pressing down on him. She wasn't just holding him down physically, she was holding him down with her strength, her courage, and the knowledge that she had proven something to herself. Roran's pride had been shattered, and the other cadets now looked at Lyra with a new sense of awe. The youngest cadet had just taken down the most feared fighter in the academy, and in that moment, the air was charged with a new kind of respect. The FIAM training had only just begun, but Lyra had already proven that she wasn't just another cadet. She was someone to be reckoned with. Lyra didn't know where this power inside her came from, but one thing was certain. She was ready to find out. The test of strength. The morning sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the training grounds. Lyra felt a cold thrill run through her veins as the instructors called the cadets to gather. Today was different. The day before had been physical, but this was something else. Today they would face the ultimate test, the apex predators. The apex predators were no ordinary creatures. They were the stuff of legend. Massive, fast, and fiercely intelligent, these beasts had been bred for one thing: to hunt. They had been unleashed on the galaxy to wipe out entire colonies, and no one had ever survived an encounter with them. This was no longer a test of physical strength. It was a test of survival, of instinct, and of sheer willpower. Lyra's heart raced as she stood in line with the other cadets. The massive creatures were locked away in cages, but the fear they exuded was palpable. The ground beneath her feet seemed to shake with their presence. The younger cadets shifted nervously, but Lyra stood still, her mind focused. She had faced opponents before. Now it was time to face a monster. As the first cadet was called forward, the cage door creaked open. A monstrous figure emerged, a towering beast, its scales glinting in the sunlight. Its eyes, glowing a fierce yellow, locked onto its target. The cadet froze, paralyzed by fear, and before anyone could blink, the creature lunged. The test was brutal, merciless. The cadet didn't even stand a chance. In moments, the beast had pinned him to the ground, its jaws closing around his throat. Lyra's stomach twisted, but she didn't turn away. She had to be ready. She had to face this. Her training had prepared her for combat, but nothing could prepare anyone for this moment. This was pure survival. One by one, the cadets failed. The apex predators tore through them like paper. Lyra's turn was coming closer. Her hands were shaking, but she clenched them into fists. This wasn't about bravery. This wasn't about showing off. It was about surviving. When her name was called, the air felt thick. The other cadets looked at her, some with pity, others with scorn, but no one expected her to last. They thought she was weak, just a child playing at war. They were about to be proven wrong. The cage door swung open. Lyra stepped forward, her boots crunching on the gravel. The apex predator, a massive creature with red-tinted scales and long, sharp claws, stood in front of her. Its body rippled with power, and its low growl sent a chill down her spine. It was twice her size, but Lyra's eyes didn't waver. She wasn't going to let fear control her. She had something the others didn't, something deep inside that pushed her forward. The creature growled louder, snapping its jaws. Lyra's instincts kicked in. She ducked and rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the beast's first strike. The crowd gasped. She hadn't frozen. She hadn't panicked. She was moving. She was thinking. She was surviving. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Lyra focused on the creature's movements. Its eyes locked on her, following her every move. The beast was fast, but it wasn't invincible. She noticed a weakness. Its underbelly was less protected. The apex predator lunged again, and Lyra seized the opportunity. With a surge of energy, she darted forward, using her small frame to her advantage. In one swift motion, she aimed for its vulnerable spot. Her elbow slammed into the creature's ribcage, the force of the blow sending it stumbling backward. The crowd fell silent. The creature let out a deafening roar, but Lyra didn't stop. She followed through with a flurry of punches and kicks, her movements precise, calculated. Her small fists may not have been strong enough to kill the creature in one blow, but her speed and determination were more than enough to throw it off balance. The predator faltered, its confidence shaken. It made another attempt to strike, but Lyra was already one step ahead. She ducked, spun, and with one final strike, landed a powerful blow to its head. The apex predator collapsed to the ground, defeated. The arena erupted in shock. The other cadets stared, mouths agape. Lyra, the youngest cadet, had done what no one thought possible. She had survived the apex predators, but this victory didn't just mark a moment of triumph. It marked the beginning of something much larger. Lyra had proven she wasn't just the youngest cadet. She was a force to be reckoned with. And the galaxy was about to learn her name. The first blow, the arena was silent. The apex predator, a creature born of nightmares, lay motionless on the ground, its massive form twitching slightly. Its eyes, once filled with deadly intent, were now dull, staring up at the sky. Lyra stood above it, chest heaving, sweat streaming down her face. The air felt heavy, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. No one moved. No one spoke. Lyra's heart was pounding in her chest. Her legs were trembling from the adrenaline that still coursed through her veins. She had done it. She had taken down the apex predator. No cadet had ever survived an encounter like this before. Yet here she was, alive, standing over the beast that had claimed the lives of so many before her. She looked down at the creature, her breath steadying. How had she done it? Her mind raced, replaying every moment of the fight. The instant the creature lunged at her, her instincts had kicked in, but it wasn't just her training. It was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. A voice broke the silence. Did you just kill it? The words were shaky, as if the speaker himself couldn't believe them. It was Roran, the cadet who had once mocked her. His voice held a mixture of awe and disbelief. Lyra didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken louder than words ever could. The instructors, who had been watching from the sidelines, finally stepped forward. They had seen countless cadets fail, had watched warriors crumble before the apex predators without hesitation, but Lyra, she had done what was thought impossible. She had taken down one of the most fearsome creatures in existence with a single blow. The head instructor, a stern man known as Captain Drex, narrowed his eyes at her. His voice was low but commanding. "How did you do it?" he asked. Lyra hesitated for only a moment, her mind still struggling to make sense of what had just happened. I don't know, she said honestly. I just acted. Captain Drex studied her closely, his gaze intense, as if weighing her every word. You don't know? He repeated. You're telling me you killed it without knowing how? Lyra nodded, unsure of how to explain. It was true. The fight had felt almost instinctual, like her body had moved on its own, guided by something inside her. She had never been trained to fight like that. It was as if the fight had awakened something deep within her, something primal. The cadets around her whispered among themselves. Their disbelief had turned into admiration, but still they couldn't fathom what had just occurred. The youngest cadet, who they had once dismissed as weak, had done what none of them had even dared to dream. Captain Drex raised his hand to silence the crowd. This is not a moment for celebration, he said firmly, his eyes locked onto Lyra. It's a moment for understanding. You've just crossed into a new world, Cadet, and it's a world where strength and weakness are no longer defined by age. They're defined by what's inside. Lyra stood tall, her gaze unwavering. She had proven herself in the arena, but the real challenge was yet to come. She knew that this victory was just the beginning. She had tapped into something powerful, something that had been hidden deep within her. But what was it? Where had it come from? And more importantly, how could she control it? As the instructors called for the next test to begin, Lyra's mind raced. The first blow had come naturally, but could she repeat it? Could she face even greater challenges and still come out on top? She wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. She wasn't the same cadet who had walked onto this battlefield. She was something more. And the galaxy was about to find out just how dangerous she could be. The silence in the arena was thick with anticipation. The cadets, once doubtful of her, now watched her with a mix of respect and fear. Lyra, however, had no time for their stares. She had bigger things to focus on. The real test of her strength was only just beginning. The mystery unfolds. The days following her victory over the apex predator were nothing short of a whirlwind. Lyra's name spread quickly through the academy, whispered from cadet to cadet, from instructor to instructor. Everyone wanted to know how the youngest, most underestimated cadet had managed to do what no one had even dared to dream. But Lyra herself was just as confused as they were. Every night she lay awake in her quarters, staring at the ceiling, replaying the fight over and over again in her mind. It wasn't just the physicality of the blow that haunted her. It was the feeling, the rush of energy that surged through her at the exact moment her fist had collided with the creature's skull. It was as if something deep inside her had awakened, something raw and untapped, ready to unleash its power. But what was it? Where had it come from? Lyra had never experienced anything like it. She had trained her entire life to become a warrior. But this felt different. It wasn't just skill or strength. It was something primal, something almost otherworldly. She had touched something beyond the realm of normal human capabilities, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it was only the beginning. Days passed, and the instructors began to observe her more closely. They noticed her increased focus, the way she moved, fluid, almost predatory. Her reflexes were sharper, faster. She wasn't just learning at an accelerated pace. It was as if she was being guided by something outside herself. Captain Drex, the head instructor, pulled her aside after one of the training sessions. "Lyra," he said in his usual calm but stern voice, "you're different now. You've changed." Lyra stiffened, unsure of what to say. "I don't understand," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what's happening to me." Drex studied her for a long moment. His eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in deep thought. "There's something about you, Cadet," he finally said. "Something special. You've been hiding it from yourself, and now it's out in the open." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Drex's gaze turned distant as if he was recalling something from his own past. "There are stories, old stories, about warriors who possessed something more than just physical strength, something beyond human. I've seen it in others, but never in someone so young. His voice dropped lower, almost as if he was afraid to speak the words aloud. You may be one of them. Lyra's mind raced. She had heard rumors, whispers from the older cadets, but they were always dismissed as fairy tales. Stories of warriors who could call upon hidden powers, warriors who could fight as if guided by a force beyond their understanding. She had never believed them until now. What does that mean for me? Lyra asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. Drex met her gaze. It means you have a choice. You can ignore it, suppress it, and continue with the training like any other cadet. Or, he paused, the weight of his next words heavy in the air. Or you can embrace it. You can seek out the truth about what lies inside you. But be warned, Lyra, the path you choose will change everything. It will change you. Forever. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. She was no longer just a cadet. She was standing at the edge of something much bigger, something she had never imagined possible. And yet she felt no fear, only a deep, unshakable pull toward the unknown. As the days passed, the whispers only grew louder. The other cadets began to look at her differently, some with awe, others with suspicion. They didn't know what to make of her, but they knew one thing for certain. Lyra was no longer just the youngest cadet. She was a mystery that needed to be solved. The higher-ranking officers and commanders began to take interest, watching her more closely. Lyra couldn't escape their watchful eyes. And with every glance, she felt a growing sense of pressure. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the truth, but she knew one thing. She couldn't ignore it anymore. The truth was out there, and Lyra was determined to find it. But little did she know. The answer she sought would lead her into a world of danger and betrayal, where the very forces she was trying to understand would turn against her. And as the mystery unfolded, Lyra couldn't help but wonder, was she meant to lead the charge into this new, unknown world, or would she become just another pawn in a game much bigger than herself? Facing the unknown, the days blurred together in a haze of intense training and sleepless nights. Lyra couldn't escape the pull of the mystery growing inside her. Every time she closed her eyes, she could feel it. The power, the raw energy that surged through her veins when she fought, when she felt that primal instinct take control. It wasn't just in the arena. It was in everything she did. It was in the way she moved, how she reacted to danger, how quickly she learned and adapted. She was no longer just a cadet in the elite war corps. She was something more. But what was she? The answers were slipping through her fingers like sand in the wind. She was no closer to understanding what had happened to her, or where this strange power had come from. And each day the questions only grew heavier. Was she just a soldier? Or was there something deeper hidden beneath the surface? She couldn't ignore the whispers. Others had noticed. She could feel their eyes on her, tracking every movement, every reaction. Then one day, everything changed. Captain Drex called her to his office, a grim expression on his face. Lyra, he began, his voice quieter than usual. You need to come with me. Lyra followed him through the cold, sterile hallways of the academy, her mind racing. She had no idea what was happening, but she could sense that this was different. There was something urgent about Drex's demeanor, something serious. When they reached the briefing room, Drex handed her a data pad. She stared at it, puzzled, before glancing up at him for an explanation. This is classified, Drex said, his voice low. I've been monitoring your progress closely. And what I've found, it's not just a coincidence, Lyra. What you're experiencing, the power you're tapping into, it's part of something much bigger. Lyra felt a chill settle in her chest. What are you talking about? Drex looked around as if making sure they weren't being overheard. It's called the Genesis Protocol, he whispered. And you might be its first successful outcome. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The Genesis Protocol was something she had heard in hushed rumors, mentioned only in the most secretive corners of the academy. It was said to be a covert experimental program designed to create the perfect warrior, someone who could push beyond human limits. But the stories had always been vague, nothing but whispers of failed experiments and dark intentions. "You're telling me this is what's happening to me?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. Drex nodded. The experiments that led to the Genesis Protocol were designed to unlock untapped human potential, to push the boundaries of strength, speed, intelligence, everything. You're not the first attempt, but you might be the first one to survive and thrive. Lyra's mind raced. She had always believed she was just another cadet, but now she was learning she was part of a much darker plan. Her abilities, her newfound strength, her instincts, they were all the result of a program she hadn't even known existed. Was she a weapon? A tool to be controlled? The weight of it all began to sink in. "There's more," Drex continued, his voice growing more serious. "The higher-ups have been watching you. You were never meant to be a simple cadet. They saw potential in you before you even knew what you were capable of. And now that you've started to tap into that power, they'll come for you." Lyra felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The fear, the uncertainty, it was starting to overwhelm her. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Drex looked at her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. "You need to decide, Lyra. You can stay here, continue training, continue being controlled, or you can leave. You can find out what's really going on, what they're hiding from you, but be warned, if you choose the latter, you won't be able to go back." Lyra stood frozen, the weight of Drex's words pressing down on her. She had never felt so lost, so uncertain. Her life had been shaped by the academy, by the mission. But now everything was shrouded in darkness. She had to decide whether to stay in the only world she had ever known, or step into the unknown, where the truth about her power, her past, and her future awaited. But as she looked at Drex, she realized one thing. There was no turning back. The choice had already been made, and whatever path she took, it would lead her into a war she wasn't prepared for. A war that would force her to confront the deepest parts of herself and face the very forces that had created her. The final confrontation. The air was thick with tension. Lyra could feel it in her bones, an electric hum that pulsed through every fiber of her being. The decision had been made. She was no longer just a cadet. She had embraced the truth of who she was, the secret that had been hidden from her. She had chosen the path of discovery, the path that would take her far from the controlled walls of the academy, and into a world where danger waited at every turn. But now, standing on the edge of an unknown world, she realized the true cost of her choice. The higher-ups had been watching her every move. They knew what she had uncovered, and they would stop at nothing to regain control over her. Lyra had gathered her allies, fellow cadets who, like her, had once believed in the Academy's noble cause, only to realize the truth behind the Genesis Protocol. Together, they had learned of the true purpose behind their training and the dark forces pulling the strings. The Academy was not a place for building warriors. It was a breeding ground for weapons. Weapons meant to be deployed in a war they had no control over. Now the time had come. The final battle wasn't just about survival. It was about freedom. Lyra wasn't fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for all those who had been manipulated, used, and discarded. But she also knew the price of failure. If she lost this fight, everything she had fought for would be wiped away, and the Academy would unleash its ultimate weapon, an army of genetically engineered soldiers who would dominate the galaxy with no mercy. The ground shook as the enemy's forces descended on their location, elite guards sent by the Academy's highest commanders. These soldiers were not like the cadets Lyra had faced in training. They were stronger, faster, and had been created with one purpose in mind: to eliminate anyone who threatened the Genesis Protocol. And now they were coming for her. As Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounded, but her resolve was stronger than ever. The truth of her power was no longer a mystery. It was her strength, her weapon. She had unlocked something within herself, something that gave her the ability to fight like no one else. Her senses were sharper, her reflexes faster, and her mind was clear. She was ready. The first wave of enemies charged, their weapons raised high. But Lyra didn't hesitate. She moved with a speed that seemed impossible, dodging their attacks with fluid precision. Each step she took was calculated. Each strike she made was deadly. She fought with the confidence of someone who had finally embraced her true nature. But the fight wasn't over yet. A figure stepped forward from the shadows, someone Lyra had never expected to see again. Captain Drex. His face was stern, but there was something in his eyes that she couldn't read. He had always been the one to push her, to challenge her, but now he was standing in front of her, an enemy. "Lyra," Drex said, his voice cold, "you've made a terrible mistake. You were never meant to uncover the truth. You were meant to be a tool, a weapon. And now you've turned against us." Lyra's heart ached. She had trusted Drex. He had been her mentor, her guide, but now she understood. He was just another pawn in the game. The Academy had turned him into something else. Someone who believed in their cause so deeply that he was willing to sacrifice everything, even his own morals. "I'm not a weapon, Drex," Lyra replied, her voice steady but filled with defiance. "I'm not just a soldier. I'm someone who will fight for what's right." Drex's expression hardened. "Then you've made your choice." With a swift movement, Drex drew his weapon and charged. Lyra didn't flinch. She knew what was at stake, and she knew she had to face him, just like every other enemy she had encountered. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had the power to end this. Their weapons clashed with a force that shook the ground beneath them. Drex was skilled. He had trained Lyra himself, but he was no match for the raw, untamed power Lyra had unlocked within herself. As the battle raged on, Lyra could feel the energy growing within her. She was in control now. The power that had once terrified her was now a part of her, something she could command. In one final explosive move, Lyra disarmed Drex and sent him crashing to the ground. She stood over him, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The fight was over, but as Drex lay defeated at her feet, Lyra knew this wasn't the end. This battle had been just the beginning. She had unlocked her true potential, but now she had to face the consequences of that power. There were still forces out there, forces that wanted to control her, use her, and destroy everything she had fought for. The war for freedom had only just begun.